What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the BizDad Podcast. Today, I am stoked to have a good conversation with RJ Galdorisi. RJ, you and I chatted on the Delegate That podcast, and it was awesome kind of getting to know your story of the experience that you have, and I'm really looking forward to sharing with my BizDad Podcast audience a little bit more about you and talk a little bit more on the family side as well, because you're very much on the family side focus as well, so I'm looking forward to chat with you on there. So if you can, RJ, tell us a little bit about yourself and tell us what your business is.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you. And a couple of quick things before we get started. One, very few people get my name right, and you get it right every time. So that's great. Good for you. Secondly, but most importantly, I want to thank you for your service and all the men and women that have kept this country free and allow us to be so cavalier about that freedom. It's men and women like you that allow us to live our lives. So thank you for that service. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. It's something that's near and dear to me. So who I am, what I do, I'm RJ Galdorisi, and I'm Long Island, New York. I'm married my high school sweetheart. I am in transition as far as business goes, so we could touch on that. I have 4 beautiful children that I put a lot of effort in, and they exhausted me in many ways. So I had to keep myself, with part of Go Abundance, age-defying health. And that's kind of, I've lived my life that way. And thank goodness, because my kids still give me a run for my money. And I enjoy business. I enjoy family. And really, there's not a lot in between. I can live with those 2 things alone. My wife kind of holds a social calendar, because otherwise I would exhaust myself just with my business pursuits and taking care of family. But she makes sure we have some fun and some vacations in between.
Welcome to the BizDad Podcast, where we dive into the melding of fathership and entrepreneurship with your host, the original BizDad himself, Adam Labar. Adam is a Christian, a former Air Force officer, a dad to 3 amazing kids, a coach, a real estate investor, and a business owner. On this podcast, he'll explore the unique journeys of amazing dads who are striving for greatness in both business and family. So whether you're a dad who is an aspiring entrepreneur, a seasoned business owner, or simply a man striving to be a better dad, get ready as the BizDad brings you conversations to inspire, challenge, and equip you to be a better dad and entrepreneur. And now, here's Adam.
Yeah, so I mean, with 4 kiddos now, kind of all out of the house, from what I'm gathering, or at least age-wise, they're all adults. I would imagine that opened up the calendar a little bit, or did that close up the calendar even more because now you're able to buckle down? How did that kind of work for you?
Well, I do have one still home. She's actually 2 weeks. She graduates with her master's. She's a special ed teacher here on Long Island, and she's not leaving Long Island. The other 3 have traveled all over the world, live all over the country. So yeah, we spend a lot of time visiting them. So that's kind of where my wife and I, our calendar has gone, visiting our kids who have lived everywhere from San Diego to Charleston to Florida. So yeah, that's kind of where we fill in the gaps.
Very good. I like it. Oh, and I warned you before we started recording it. I may get a kiddo, and then right at the very beginning, the littlest comes in. Say hello.
Hello. What
you got a sticker?
Sticker?
Yeah. Can you say hi? What's
your name?
Can you say Diana? You see yourself on there? Yeah, you're on the screen. Yeah.
So
yep, and there's Rourke.
Hey,
the 2 of them showing up. Oh, now they're calling in Adam. So now we get all 3 of them.
Let's go. Let's get Adam in there. We'll have a group picture.
He's in the middle of being an engineer out there, putting together. So they've got this this box that he gets sent every month that he gets to put this engineering thing together. So he's out there doing that right now.
He's got a mechanical mind then, huh?
That's great. He does. Oh, there we go.
Hey, Adam.
There's all 3 of them.
What's up, handsome? How are you
Mr.
today?
RJ said hello to you guys. Oh, my goodness.
You're a punk,
You guys like having a little sister?
Do you guys like having a little sister, he said? Yeah. Do you like having a little sister, buddy?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. I don't think they like it at all. They're not fans.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, so Mr. RJ has 4 kids, 3 girls and a boy. But they're all older.
Yeah, they're all.
Hi. All right.
Bye.
You guys get the heck out of here. Say goodbye. Say bye.
Bye. Good to meet you guys.
Love you guys. Thanks for visiting. I love you, little lady. Where'd your sticker go? Did it fall off? Sticker down. Sticker down.
Uh-oh.
Oh, here it is.
Stop
All
everything.
right. There you go. All right.
Here's Rock. He's not
Love
done.
Never. All right, get out of here, dude. Love you, bud.
Love you.
That's
Crazy
great.
kids.
That's great, Adam. I love that.
Yeah, this
What's
is
better than that, right?
this is my life. You know,
That's-
sometimes
that-
I look at this and I go, "Boy, I really did not have a very productive day." And then I remember all the times I've come in and I'm like, "All right, well, at least that part was productive." You know, I got to connect a little bit differently and more than I would if I was in an office or they were at a normal school. So,
Agreed.
yeah,
Agreed.
it's-
They're growing up in a way that someday they'll recognize what a blessing it really was. You know, they don't
sometimes
know
I
that.
have to look at it and recognize that same thing. So, not always easy. Not
Yeah.
always easy. So you had mentioned now your time is kind of getting filled up with visiting the other three kids. So that's a lot of fun. I want to rewind a little bit. I want to get some background on you, just on your personal, like your upbringing and whatnot. Tell me a little bit what it was like for you growing up, especially with your dad, who your dad was, and what he meant to you, kind of growing up, what it looked like for you, kind of living your life under his eyes.
Yeah, you know, looking back as I got older, growing up, my mom was the emotional and the foundation in all senses as far as communication. I had 4 sisters and then me, so I was the prince. My mom swears I wasn't in an accident, but I was the prince. She calls me. I'm 59 years old. She still calls me Prince. She's 93 when she calls me every day, or I call her. And it was, if a mother could love a son too much, my mother loved me too much. And I say that because there's the paradox of that, in the sense that there wasn't a day in my life that I didn't feel that I was wanted and loved and had a purpose and had someone to go to. Adam, I had a home filled with love and security, that when things went wrong in my life, I knew I could go home and seek shelter and seek reassurance from my mom. And that's the kind of person she was. So she would, when I come home, no matter what the situation was, it was never, "What's wrong with you? Why'd you do that? I can't believe you did that." It was, "Hey, what'd you learn from this? How can you do better? You know you are better than that. You if you rethink that, what do you think you could have done differently?" So I always had that lesson, that fallback. But she did it while she was comforting me and loving me and probably making me something to eat. So there was a lot of that went on. The downside of that was that people today don't believe it, because I'm much more of an A-type personality, outgoing personality. But growing up, I was a mama's boy. I was quiet. I was shy. I would hide behind her. I didn't like to make phone calls. I didn't like to, we go get ice cream and I have her orders for me. So she sheltered me a lot regarding that. My dad was the opposite. My dad thought I was too soft, and he pushed me harder. Now, my mom told me she loved me, where some people never hear "I love you" throughout the day, like I saw you express it to your children. It's totally beautiful, because some parents believe in "I show you I love you" by feeding you, clothing you, educating you, and others do all that and then say "I love you" and communicate that. My mom was communicative about her love. My dad was not. In fact, I don't think I heard "I love you" from my dad till I was a man and might have been married and had kids of my own. But I never didn't feel that he loved me, and it never dawned on me that he never said the words. But he was the man who set the values and the morals and lived with integrity, and he showed a work ethic. So I learned a lot of those things from my dad, and I knew my dad stood for respect. Respect was big with him. And he wasn't a disciplinarian. Like I was never punished. I was never worried about someone, putting a hand on me to correct my behavior. That was not his way. His way was more of let me know he's disappointed and that I had to do better and be better. But I often say that I learned as much from my dad's weaknesses and shortcomings as I did from his strengths. Because there was a lot of my dad that, being the youngest and the only boy, my dad was already had many business failures, and he didn't grow up with love in his family. He didn't know what love was. My mom taught him that, and he didn't know how to deal with disappointment. He didn't know how to adjust to what life throws at you. So his way of doing it was just go take a nap. He didn't drink. He didn't have any bad habits. He didn't have any vices that would take him away from stress. He always came home, but he'd take a nap. He took a lot of naps because that's how he would seek his shelter, by just going to bed, because he didn't know how else to deal with it. And my mom picked up the slack. So I had this balance between them, and I really learned a lot. So some of the things, for example, people ask, well, what are some of the shortcomings? My dad was always, he'd get an inspiration about doing a project, whatever that project might be. It could be business or it could be around the house. He was going to convert our garage into a bar because he wanted to have he wasn't a drinker at all, but he wanted another living area, entertaining space in the house. And in the end of the day, we didn't have a garage or we didn't have a bar. We each had a unfinished room, and my dad would do that all over and he'd move on to the next thing. So one thing I really learned, and I'm almost obsessive about it, is finishing what I started. I'm very big on that. I don't like unfinished projects. And that's one of my dad's shortcomings that really drove me in life as a young man, as well as my adulthood and in business. So I learned those things. But, later on, as I got married, I had I used to blame my dad for a lot of things, took my mom's side in whatever arguments. They stayed married forever. But, they successfully fought for whatever it was, 40 years. And my dad passed 27 years ago from diabetes complications. He didn't take good care of himself. And that's another thing. I really do, and I don't say it to impress anybody, but I really do keep myself in peak physical shape, partly because I watched the deterioration of my dad not taking care of himself. So there was a lot of those things that I wouldn't have learned if I had a different dad. But my mom was the counterbalance to that, because she was so loving and so caring and so thorough, and she taught me. She really, and then I had older sisters, so I was raised with a very strong feminine side of me. So I was good to the women around me, and it actually made me a better father, because as a dad, I'm a very emotional dad. I'm very connected, even with my daughters. Very connected in every way. I mean, my adult daughters, they call me regularly. They share with me their emotional state, what they're going through, and they trust my judgment. And that's a beautiful thing. There's days that I say, geez, don't they have a friend to call? But they call me. And that's really a beautiful thing. So I'm really, really grateful for that. And that was kind of the dichotomy between my mom and dad, and I learned that a lot. My dad always had big business aspirations, but again, he had the energy to think it through and then have intentions of doing it, but the minute there was a challenge, he couldn't handle it. So challenges would take him out pretty easily. And I learned to overcome challenges. I learned that if I wanted to do great things in any aspect of my life, I had to welcome those opportunities to be persistent and overcome them, and either outthink them, outmuscle them, or whatever it was. And I would see my dad just go take a nap. As a young age, I learned business from my dad, and we go look at real estate together. But a lot of times he just could never pull the plug, because he didn't have the mental stamina at that age of his life. Now, earlier on in his career, when I was a young boy, he did a lot of businesses. But, as we all know, in business, every failure, even every success exhausts you a little bit and takes a little bit. It slows you down, and his health started to take a toll. So he died at 67 years old. So I was like 35 at the time. And so I didn't get the benefit of having a dad in his best to help me in those stages of being a man. But when I became a husband and a father, obviously, like a lot of people say, my dad got smarter and had a lot more respect, and I forgave him for anything I felt he didn't do for me as a dad. I forgave him thoroughly, because then I realized I had a wife of my own, and I realized what that took, and I had children of my own, and I understood with what that took, and I realized that I was a better model of him. I really was, because I had a mother like I did. So I was able to overcome and persevere and do things differently than he did. So I was able to have the stamina where he didn't have it. So that gives you a little, but I had a beautiful upbringing. I always felt comfortable. We didn't always have a lot of money. In fact, I grew up with a scarcity mindset, because money was always an issue in our house. My parents fought over money, and then it didn't help. My mother was a go-getter. My father used to say, if my mother was a business person, they'd be wealthy, because she didn't stop. She kept going. She'd be up all night. She wouldn't go to bed till the laundry was done, and she'd get up to get us off to school in the morning. So she slept very little, but also she had tenacity, and she also had the chutzpah of she didn't have a problem having the hard conversations. So when it came to business, or my dad always had his own business employees, my dad would shy away from pulling someone aside and saying, listen, you didn't handle that correctly. My mom would say, listen, hey, Adam, I just want to tell you, I respect you, but I just want to explain something to you. I think you could have, my dad was not that guy, my mom was. So she'd always have that difficult conversation. She didn't shy away from it. And, she was definitely more of a leader than my dad. But between them, I really had a great childhood. I grew up in a great community. We had all kids we had probably about 20 kids all within a 3 or 4 year age difference, and sports and community were a big part of that. So I really had a loving, beautiful childhood. I didn't have anything that you hear about today with kids feeling less than or bullied. I was very privileged in that regard. So I'm very grateful.
Man, I think that the fact that you're able to kind of look at that and realize how grateful you should be for that is a plus, right? But it sounded like there are a couple different angles I want to take with this, but it sounded like there was some time there where you weren't in this same mindset you are now, and feeling about that upbringing, where maybe you held on to a little bit of bitterness about your father and some different things there, or maybe you weren't pleased with certain stuff. So I want to kind of rewind a little bit and correct that statement if I'm wrong. But I want to rewind a little bit to what you said about your mom, potentially being, if there was a way to be too loving, then maybe that was it, right? Where you kind of grew up shy and hiding a little bit. How did you when did you start to grow out of that feeling? Because I know that there's probably people listening that have kids that have that feeling, and they're like, man, how am I going to turn them into the alpha that I am, or whatever it is, right? And everybody's different, so we don't want to turn our kids into us. But when did you kind of start to realize or make some of those shifts and changes in who you were, to prevent yourself from remaining that quiet, shy kid that you were?
Yeah, well, it was always a work in progress, even later on. So let me put a little milestone to it, I guess, in the sense that when I went to college, part of regrets, and we all want to limit our regrets, but I also believe esoterically in that God, the universe, we are where we're supposed to be. The journey we took was what we were supposed to take. So that relieves me of where years ago, I have a lot of regret and a lot of shoulda, coulda, wouldas. But now I'm much more spiritual in belief that the road I took was the road I was supposed to take. But like I went to college to play baseball, and I got homesick and gave it up and went home. So that was part of me being a mama's boy at 18 years old. I couldn't live away from home. And so that was a big part of it. And the paradox is people, and I say this the whole point of this really is to kind of enrich some other people from my own shortcomings. But the paradox was, I was a popular kid throughout my old school years. I was literally and figuratively, the captain of football, captain of baseball, popular kid. So I never suffered from the outward appearance, but inward, I walked with insecurity, or maybe I walked with, I needed to I need to live up to that. I'm the captain. I'm in the view of other people. I'm supposed to be this person. Why do I feel less than? And that took some time to do it. So, for example, I tell the story that the embarrassing part of my mother's life was that I'd be playing baseball. I get up in the batter's box and get ready, and all of a sudden, silence, and the pitcher's on the mound ready to pitch. And all of a sudden, my mother would have a cowbell and scream out, "Come on, Prince, hit a home run for your mom." And, the catcher, the umpire would look at me like, "Prince, huh?" And I'd be like, now I got to focus on actually hitting a pitcher, right?
Yeah.
So, and I'd say, "Mom, you can't do that to me." "Oh, stop." Oh, she'd scream across the parking lot at school. I try to get out of the car and get to school before, she'd embarrass me, and she'd scream, "I love you," And the crazy part about it, Adam, is today, my kids, I expressed my love. I did everything my mother did, only I did it in a setting that wouldn't make my children feel the way I felt. But the beauty of that, and I feel successful in this, and we'll go into that a little bit, in the sense that I know I was successful because my kids would yell across the parking lot to me, "I love you, Dad." So it was reverse. They were not embarrassed by my love. They were proud of it. They loved when I brought them to friends' houses. They loved when I pick them up at a party. They loved to, quote unquote, show me off to their friends. They were proud of the father I was and the connection we had. So I want to say I did it better than my mom, only in my instance, because I was embarrassed by how much she loved me. And it's very different. Like, my wife came from a different family. My wife came from a family there was an expression of love. There was understanding that, of course, of course I love you. I'm your parents. What is wrong with you? I don't need to say it. But she didn't feel the way I felt. So it's just really, really wild how my wife felt like she didn't get enough love and I had too much love. So there is that. But to answer your question, when I was in college, when I came back from college, was a turning point. So I left college and came home, went to school on Long Island, graduated from CW Post College here. And my brother-in-law, who's a doctor and a higher thinker, I guess he saw that I needed some guidance. I guess he saw that I was struggling with becoming a man. And he introduced me to Tony Robbins. Not literally, but figuratively, right? He introduced you to Tony Robbins' teaching. And he, Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich. And he started to enrich me. And he explained to me that, rich people have libraries, poor people have big screen TVs, right? And he explained the difference, that I should aspire to personal development. That's what I should aspire to reading. So I wasn't necessarily a great student. I didn't enjoy school so much. If I was a student later in life, I would have done great at it, because I developed a love and a passion for education. But I then decided I was going to delve in and started a library of my own and personal development. And I practiced those teachings, and I did everything I could. So that started to help my personal development side, my belief in myself, and the evolution of the man and the person I planned on being. And so that's helped me a great deal in that regard, in the personal development that I discovered on my own. And so that was really the coming of age for me, really.
Yeah. You and I have so much in common in the path that you were taking, and I love kind of hearing your story, and it reminds me a lot of me. Growing up, I left for the military and then ended up going back as back to New York, still in the military, but I did it as a guard guy just to kind of get back home. And then I was like, nope, I got to get the heck out of here. I got to figure something out. And I took back off again. I mean, there was a lot involved in the middle of all that, but and I know that when we were talking about it on the Delegate That podcast, there were some more things you were talking about that just like completely in line with where I'm at. So, when I kind of look back at it, for me, some of my turning point was like my deployment to Afghanistan. I'd say was one of the biggest like shifts in my brain, and like just a smack in the face of like, nah, dude, like I'd already deployed to Iraq. I'd already been around the world, done a bunch of stuff, but something about, the trip to Afghanistan, the vacation in the mountains of Afghanistan that kind of set me on a different path for sure. How did you kind of did you catch yourself? And I'm asking this partially because I catch myself still doing it, almost going back to the mentality you had before, or was it like you rewired so well that you didn't really go down that path anymore? You didn't go down that. For lack of better terms, the softer side of you. You used to keep the soft side, especially with your kids. But when it comes to that A-type business side of the house, like do you catch yourself having to recover and go back and change your mentality again?
I love that question because, again, I will have the difficult conversations with anybody, really. And I'm very open and transparent, almost to sometimes my wife will say, reel it in. You don't have to give everyone so much information. But I love that question because there was a lot of time I was faking it till I made it. And a lot of time, and it was a disadvantage because I didn't believe it in my core. So outwardly, again, the facade, the rhetoric, I could speak and talk in the rhetoric of a Tony Robbins, but deep down. So my wife is naturally an abundant person. Holistically, that's just the way her mind operates. I was living as if I wanted to be that person, but it was like I was wearing a costume. It wasn't part of my fabric. It wasn't my core. I didn't adopt it internally. And that really held me back business-wise. So I could help anyone out there who's really listening to this. There's a big difference between playing the role and being the role. We could all be actors and you play who you want to be, that fake it till you make it. But you could do that. But if you're really working on internally, the inside out, otherwise you're always faking it till you make it. Because if you don't believe it yourself, it's easy to convince other people. But in convincing other people, it's got to start with you. So I spent many years, early years of my business career, never with my family, never with my kids. The evolution of that, what we could talk about, was only got better. But the evolution of the business of who the man I was going to become, again, the regrets, the journey. If I was the man I am today, as far as my belief system and the belief in myself back then my wealth creation would have been exponential. I held myself back because I didn't pull the triggers when I should have, in the sense of believing in myself. I found the excuses not to. I found the reasoning that, this is not such a good deal, the justifications. And I used that as a crux because we all have excuses. Some are absolutely legitimate, but the successful people find a way to circumvent those legitimate excuses. But I hid behind them, and that hurt me. It wasn't until much later on in life. So I did fall back plenty of times to the scarcity mindset, to the lack of belief, to the distrust of my own opinion. And it wasn't really till much later into my 40s did I start to develop that, no, I'm going to subscribe to this. I'm going to believe in this, and I'm going to continue going down that road. And it served me beautifully. And in the last few years, even greater in the results I've gained just by believing it. And when I say results, I don't mean materialistic results. I mean peace of mind and happiness and living in, the gap in the gain, living in the game. So I'll go there. We're a human being. We're all human beings. So when I fall into the gap, I just don't stay there. I quickly rewire my thinking. I ask myself better questions. I take a minute to show gratitude, change my breathing, change my mindset, and I go right back to what's great about this. What can I do about this? What can I control? What can I control? And the things I can't control, I let go and let God, and I leave it to God, leave it to the universe, and say, well, something of this will happen. To give you a silly analogy, metaphor, is I'm terrible with logistics, terrible with driving. I'm the type of person that says, oh, you have to go west. I go, is it left or right? I don't know. I don't know what west means. Am I turning left or right? So thank God for GPS. I don't know how I got around when I was younger, but I would miss exits. I still do. but I would miss the exit when I was younger, and I'd be dangerously to cut the wheel and try to make it, or be pounding my fist against the dashboard. And now I missed an exit. I go, well, there's a reason why I missed it. I missed that exit. There's a good reason why, and I trust in the process. So that was a long time coming, and I use that silly analogy in every area of my life, whether it be business, whether it be a relationship. I allow people to come and go from my life without holding on to that baggage, that drama, like, why did they do this? Why did that? I let it go. And that's kind of how I roll with it. And I do my best to teach my children the same, but as they've been around me all these years and they know my level of thinking and my preaching, they're human beings in their own right, and they still have, in some ways, that, and I say immaturity because we're all immature at certain ages, regardless of that. You lack the wisdom and the experience and the references. That's what experience does for us. And they'll challenge me with certain levels of thinking, and I'll say, just trust me. Just trust me, please. And sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't. And it's their life to do. I don't try to control them either. I learned that as a young dad. I don't know if you want me to keep going.
No, you're good.
Okay. So as a young dad, we'll bring it to that, I guess, and go that route, circle back to the evolution of me as a husband and a dad. So because I discovered personal development at 19 years old, which was a godsend, but there's the other side of that, right? The oversteering of it. So as now I married my high school sweetheart. We met in 5th grade. I might have kissed a couple of girls besides her, but we met in 5th grade. We both went away to college, and I came home, but she stayed away. But when I discovered personal development, internally I was an athlete. So internally I was a fighter. My father taught me to box. I literally was a fighter. So there was that aggressive side of me. And when I learned about like Tony Robbins' teachings, man, that was my militaristic approach to life, and nobody was going to tell me otherwise. And I held on to that belief, and in an obnoxious, probably immature way, that nobody was going to say Tony Robbins or the likes of personal development was my guiding light. And I'd fight you if you said otherwise. But now as a young husband and a young dad, I took those teachings and now applied them to everyone around me. So I was horrible in a sense to be around in that regard, because I had raised my standards and my expectations, as Tony Robbins talks about, and now I put them on everyone else around me. And my wife just wasn't that person. My wife was a passive, easygoing, carefree kind of person. And now I was going to make her militaristic in her. We're going to get up early, and we're going to accomplish, and we're going to get these things done. And that just wasn't her. So that put pressure on a relationship. And I've apologized to her many times over since then, because I realized that I was trying to make her who I was, what I needed. She didn't need that. She wasn't in the lack that I was in the lack. I needed the teachings of those type of people, the Tony Robbins of the world, because I needed to overcome my shyness. My wife was not shy. She was independent. She was confident. And now I was trying to make her a different version of herself. And even as a young dad, there's some benefits to it, but I came on strong with my children in a loving way, but about standards and expectations and how they were going to do things. And it had its benefits. But as I realized and had matured as a husband, as a young, I was a dad at 27 years old, had kids consecutively after that, I had to come into my own and then start to allow them to be their own person. And my mom, again, thankfully, my mom is a blessing to me in so many ways. She's such a mentor and such a matriarch of the family. And I could go to my mom and ask her questions. We just had that kind of relationship. and she would tell me, and I would listen to her. She'd critique me as a dad in a way that she'd say to me that she called me Ralphie. She still does. So she'd say, Ralphie, you have to, your children are all going to be very different. She said, I had 5 children. They were as different as the fingers on my hand. You can't raise each one the same. Somebody's going to need more emotional support. Someone's going to need more firmness. They're all going to be different. So you have to use what you're doing, but adapt to each one and give them each one they want. You can't be that old school thinking that I'm the dad, this is the way it is, and we're all going to march to the same beat. They're all going to dance to different music. And I realized that. So my wife and I, thankfully, we were married all these years later, and we're the best of friends, and we really a unified force in a lot of ways. But we grew up in two different houses, my wife and I, in the sense of the culture of the house or the vibe of the house. I was in a house where my mom was transparent. So if my father was disciplining me over something that was ridiculous because he had a bad day at work or he was tired or cranky, my mom wasn't like, listen to your father said it. If my father was wrong, my mother called it out. Leave him alone. Go take a nap. And some people say, well, that's just wrong. My wife grew up in a house where if her mother was riding her for no reason, her father said, that's your mother. Do what your mother said. So we came from two different houses. So when we came together, we had to recognize that, hey, we have to figure this out because I came from a house that if you're wrong, I'll call you out. And you came from a house that, no, we're unified. So over time, it's still not perfect. We have adult children. It's still not perfect. Sometimes, I'll say, hey, I think you're a little out of line here. And she doesn't like that. And sometimes I understand. So we filtered that a little bit. We kind of sculptured that a little bit where my delivery will be more soft in letting her recognize the scenario differently. So, but in my children, we both realized that we wanted independent thinkers. We wanted strong-minded, strong-willed people to survive and thrive in this world today. So we weren't going to raise sheep, and we wanted them to think for themselves, and we didn't want them to act one way. We wanted to come into their own. So we both took it, and I don't say this to sound arrogant, because it's not the intention at all to make any comparisons to Michelangelo and the statue of David at all. Just it's a good metaphor for that. We set out to have a vision for each child of what we want to sculpture out of this block of marble that God gave us, a block of marble for each kid. And it was our job to be Michelangelo and start the sculpture. But at some point, David, the art, took over for the artist. And then, and in some way, I'm not talking for Michelangelo because I don't really know, but in my interpretation, from my instance, at some point, the art took over and took the mallet and took over where this project was going. And then the art then took the project in its own hands and developed it into the work of art. And hence, then you have a sculpture. And we took that approach with each child because each child needed something different. And we raised them to be that way. And we encouraged them to communicate with us and tell us. Now, we taught them to be strong, independent, minded individuals who had a strong constitution and thought for themselves and stood up for themselves. But we didn't realize this, they were going to use that against us. And we say, whoa. We meant that for when you stepped outside this door. When you're inside here, you gotta curb it a little bit. And we have a good laugh about that. But we did that successfully in a lot of ways. My children did learn to be their own individual. They did learn to respect themselves and stand up for themselves. And now that did cause some issues in school with authority in some instances with some of the kids. Two of my kids particularly would, call a teacher out. They call authority out when they didn't think it was right. And that doesn't always, as we all know, that doesn't always sit well in especially in school with authority.
No way. Don't understand that. Uh-huh.
Yeah. So they would challenge them, and I'd have to go up to school and say, I'm not here to protect my child because it's my child. I'm here to tell you that's how I raised my kid. And if you spoke to him that way, then you don't deserve the respect. Because in my house, if I don't respect my children, I'm having a bad day, they're going to call me out on it. So why should you be any different? And, the teachers didn't expect that. But I wasn't the parent who my kid does no wrong. My kid was wrong. My kid was wrong. So with that said, I taught my kids, and there's a great story in there with my son that I'll share with you to prove the point that I wasn't a dad who my kid does no wrong. But my children at an early age, I started to read to them everything from age appropriate, but then I also taught to teach them about adult personal development. So all of 4 of my children I did. I practiced visualization with them. I led them to believe they could be anything they want, to live their dream. It wasn't, even as they get older, it wasn't, oh, go get a good job, you get dental insurance. What are you thinking? It was follow your dream. And in each one of them, it played out in some ways for them. So they were, although they're not even settled now in necessarily the ideal career or anything else, but that's partly because they're living life on their terms. But to bring it back a little bit, I used to practice visualization with them. So every night I'd put them to bed, I'd read them a book, we'd say our prayers, and then I'd read them something out of a personal development book, or I tell them stories of my childhood and my insecurities. I want them to know, as much as I want to be a role model for them, I want to let them know that I was fallible and I made a lot of mistakes, and the evolution of me is a better version than what I was. I was an insecure kid, and I didn't believe in myself, and I expressed it to them when they were little, so they didn't look at me as a pedestal and I was an example of that they couldn't live up to. I want to let them know that I was a fractured human being, and I got here by recognizing those fractures and working on those. So one instance, and bring this to another level, but my son, he might have been in 5th grade. He was playing football. My kid's all athletic, played at every sport. And my son was playing his football. So he was playing football. And the coach's son was, one coach's typical coach's son was a quarterback. The other was a running back. And that's okay. They were worthy of those positions. No sour grapes here. But my son was worthy of maybe being in that position, rotated in, but it just didn't happen. And at a young age, that's a whole nother subject. 5th grade football, every kid who's capable should get a shot. It shouldn't be the same kid. You're winning or losing by 30 points. Someone else should go play that position. But that didn't always happen, as we've all witnessed. But anyway, my son was put on defense, and he's put on as a linebacker. But he didn't want to be a linebacker. And I tried to express to him gratitude that you're on the field, you're playing. He wanted to score touchdowns. So one day, all these teachings came to fruition. It didn't come out of nowhere. I realized the accumulation of all my conversations with him. One night, we're laying in bed, and he goes, "Dad, I really want to score a touchdown." I go, "Well, you have to think about how you're going to pull that off." And a couple of nights later, he says, "I have an idea." I said, "What's that?" And he said, "When I make a tackle," and this is before this was a prominent thing. Not saying my son discovered it, but before it was prominent in the NFL and college. He says, "I'm going to strip the ball from the running back, and then I'll be able to run for a touchdown." And I said, "All right, let's see it." And he worked on that. He visualized that. Okay, so I taught him proper visualization. Smell the grass, hear the crowd, feel the position, feel the helmet on your head. Know what that's like. Hear the sounds, hear the coaching. Put yourself in a position. So I went through, you get it, put in the position of feeling it, being it, as if it was really happening. And sure enough, that Saturday morning, I'm pushing my youngest in the stroller, watching the game, and all of a sudden I see number 30 make a tackle, go in, pack of kids, and all of a sudden I see number 30 running 80 yards the other way with a football in his hand for a touchdown. Nice. And I was like, wow, now this is a lesson that I could teach it, I could talk it, but now he learned that lesson.
Yeah.
So my son's 30 years old today, now, and I still talk to him about that. And when he's having a tough time, I say, "You remember that? Remember number 30? And we visualize those things. And, I coached his travel baseball team. And I think I happened to be a really great coach, although he went on to play college lacrosse. So that might tell you something as maybe I wasn't as great as I thought as a coach, but he went on to play college lacrosse. My daughters played the college soccer. And there was a lot of lessons in that. But also my son, because he was a athletic, he was a lot like me, but he was an aggressive kid and for authority a lot, and trying to figure it out. There was a time in his life he went down the wrong path. He was hanging out because he was big for his age at the time, and he was a lot of accolades for being a great athlete. And he liked to play up, and he did play up, and he hung out with older kids, and that could be dangerous at certain age groups, right? Because now every grade takes you into a whole different level of testing, your own curiosities. And he started hanging out with older kids, and we had a loving home, supporting home, and all that. But he started to go down to drinking at a young age and sneaking girls in the house and doing things that we just didn't approve of. And he started to argue back and fight back. And I won't go into all the details, but it went on for a while, and he tried to see therapists and tried to see things to do. But because he was a great student, and we go to teacher parents and conferences, and one teacher would say, he's like Jesus Christ. He could if I'm having a problem in class, he gets up and says, everyone shut up and sit down, and everybody listens. And she's like, thank God for your son. He's really a blessing. I go to the next class, and they go, your son, I don't know what I'm going to do with him. I'm ready to expel him from school. And they say, how could this be? So what that told us, and the therapist would tell us, he knew when he was doing right. He knew he was doing wrong. He knew the difference. He he saw weakness in people and would apply leverage to get what he wanted out of it and really take over a situation. But so there was one point where he was out of hand and fighting with me and fighting with his mom in the house, and say, where'd this come from? And, Adam, one night, till this day, the hardest day of my life, I had called the cops, had him arrested. And he was probably about 14 years old. Again, he was captain of football and star athlete, lacrosse and everything else. And they took him out in handcuffs. And he looked at me like, you're having me arrested? What kind of father are you? Mm-hmm. And I sat there with tears in my eyes, and I cried. And it was the hardest thing I ever did. But I realized that I didn't have any more answers. I thought I did as a dad. I thought with personal development and who I was as a leader and a role model, I thought I did it all right. But then I was given this challenge, and so was he. And I had no other choice but to respond in a way that was so outside the way I was raised and what I ever thought I'd do. But I believe to this day, it saved his life. We were both scarred for it for a little while, but we're the best of friends. Him and I flipped real estate together down in the St. Pete, Tampa area. So we're business partners in a lot of ways. But, so the evolution from saying prayers in bed and teaching my son, how to visualize, and my daughters too, I don't want to leave my daughters out of this, and the success he had, but then also right down to having my own son arrested because the trajectory of his life was going down the wrong road. And I realized that I couldn't control him, but I needed to stop him from going down a reckless path, because I didn't want to then one day say, what could I have done differently? And I have such an extraordinary relationship with my wife and with my children that what I think of now, my consolation is because my wealth trajectory was on a phenomenal path as a young businessman. And, life kicked me in the stomach a couple of times and set me back. As you do enough business deals, it's going to happen. So yeah. I've taken some big hits in my net worth and in my business, and did my best to recoup that. But I always had in my head, and I still do, legacy wealth. I wanted to hand over money to generations to come. And that was always a driving force to me. And I didn't realize till now, especially being in GoBundance, talking to other people, how that's not always the best thing for your kids. Yeah. Second generation, third generation, sometimes they don't make that far, but it can screw up their life, like a lottery winner. If they haven't earned it, they don't know any better. Now, to take you back a step, I was always in the hospitality business, also in the insurance business, but I was in the deli, the catering, cafeteria business. All of my kids worked in my business. Over summers, after school, college years, they did off-premise events. They worked hard. They saw how hard I worked. They respected it. But my girls would carry catering equipment, barbecue grills, and guys would stop and go, "Oh, that's the boss's daughter. No, let me get that." And they'd say, "Back off. I'll carry my own grill." So my kids knew hard work. So I knew that if my kids did, when the time comes when my kids do come into money, that they will know what to do with it. I taught each of my kids about cash flow, about budgeting, about investing, so they all understand and live by a budget and keeping money to live their best life and enjoy their lives, but they understand the responsibility of money. But to speed that up, maybe because I realized I wasn't going to leave the legacy wealth that I once wanted to leave them to the extreme that I want to leave them to. I realized that more importantly, the lesson here was legacy love. And that's what I want to give my kids. So I live every day, and it stems from many years ago when I was a young dad. I read a book, and I think it was something like Leaving the Light On. I forget the name of the author. But in that book, it said, when raising your children, you're raising the next generation. You're really raising your grandchildren. So take that into consideration. Everything you do is influencing generations to come. So when I read that statement, I got really deep. I was really a pretty emotionally deep dad, and really communicated to my kids and showed them my love and cried to them or whatever it might be. I never held anything back from them. But then I realized that I had a responsibility for generations to come. And I now, even today, Adam, I look at it like, the generations to come may not know who I am. And that's okay. But they will feel the effects of me being a father. They will know what love is. It may not be attributed to me, but it doesn't matter because I don't need the recognition. I just need that legacy of love and communication unconditionally to carry on. So part of that is I left that out. But when I discovered Tony Robbins, I discovered journaling at 19 years old, and I've journaled ever since. And what I did for each one of my kids, from the time my wife was pregnant, we got the news we were pregnant, I started a journal for each child before I even knew their sex or anything else. And each child had their own journal, which was very hard to do. As I had 4 kids in my own journal, I spent a lot of time, falling asleep with a journal.
A lot of writing. Yeah,
a lot and I started each journal off with, this is dedicated to recording the most important life in the world, and I put their name in it. And when they all came of 16 years old, I gave them their stack of journals, and said to them, "This is yours. I recorded your life up to this point, and carried on." And each one of my kids journal themselves, so their lives are in print. They'll often say, "Dad, it's great, except we're not sure we can read your handwriting." So that's the other side of it. But I taught them the gift of journaling, and so that also goes to the next generation of love and paying it forward. And I like to think that, and I tell them all the time, don't hold me responsible for your shortcomings. Now you're adults. Now you have the tools to fix them. I didn't do everything right. I'm sure there's times I was impatient. Sure, there's times that you wish I would have been, sterner. There's times I should have been softer. But now it's for you to correct yourself and also to be a better version when you're a parent one day. I don't have any grandchildren yet, but I tell them, there's no excuse for you not to be a better version of mom and I, your own children. And that to me is success. And when my kids say, "Yeah, I didn't like you did this," I go, "Oh, how dare you? Do you understand what I go, great, do it differently." Yeah. So that's what I want for them. And that the other thing is for the young dads out there, home videos. Now today with camera phones and all that, I don't know if people actually catalog them and use them other than just have them somewhere on the cloud somewhere. But back in the day, I raised my kids with camcorders, and even shaking hands or not, I have years of footage of them. And even when my kids were in college and high school age, they'd walk in the door and one of the younger ones were watching home videos. They would stop in their tracks and sit down and watch. They loved watching themselves. And even now they'll come home and we'll watch Christmases of past and vacations of past. And they don't remember all of it. And it's such a beautiful, beautiful gift that we're able to pass on to them. So I tell young dads today, catalog all your videos, take them out, put them, your kids are going to love them, and they'll treasure those for a lifetime to come. So
for sure.
So I'm
Man,
sorry, man. I've been rambling here, bro.
Dude, this is the least amount I've ever talked on this podcast because you just keep going down stuff that I want to keep listening to, so I don't interrupt. It creates a lot of questions, but man, there's just so much stuff in there, and you mentioned the legacy of love, and I wanted to throw that in there that I really love that. And I've been trying to talk to people about your legacy is more about your last name than it is about your bank account, and it's like. Your last name is going to continue on much longer than your bank account is going to. So why don't we focus on that family portion of it more than the bank account? And that leads me into one of my questions I had. I mean, you mentioned all of your kids working in the business at some point. I know based off of our conversation on the Delegate That podcast is you worked a lot of hours in the business. So how did you kind of work through hey, I'm really growing a business here. I'm doing a whole bunch of stuff on the entrepreneurial side. How did you kind of balance that with trying to still stay being the positive, engaging father that you wanted to be? Where did you find some of the problems arose, and how did you and your wife work through those issues of you not maybe balancing some of that as well as you'd like to?
Yeah. So I am a selfless person, and I say that with humility. I hate's a strong word. I don't ever want to come off as arrogant, right? But I realized for a lot of years, Adam, as a person, even in business environment, being now like a business advisor, I kept quiet because I don't want to come off wrong. I don't want to come off as a know-it-all and preach and tell people what they should do. But I realized that in some ways I was doing a disservice. So I don't want to come off to anybody watching that with arrogance, but I have wisdom that I've learned through making mistakes. So I want to share it so people could avoid those mistakes. What I did was I was really selfless in the sense that I went to work early in the morning, but I also, to this day, this morning I was up at 3:00 in the morning. I'll get up at 3:30 in the morning, get my workout in. So my workouts or my reading or my education or my self-improvement didn't take away from family time because I did it at hours that was sleep hours. I took away from my own sleep. And then also, like, I gave up golf for many, many years. I was a pretty good golfer. I stopped golfing on Sundays with my buddies because now some guys say, you need to be a man, you need to that interaction. It wasn't as important to me. I'd be out golfing on a Sunday morning, stand over a putt, and right away my mind to go to guilt, like, my kids are home. Like, I worked all week. What am I doing here? And that's when I said, I'm done. I gave up. One season I played in a softball league. I gave it up. I gave up all those extracurricular activities for me, other than like running marathons and things like that. But those things I brought in. So when my kids in the morning, when I was training for marathons, either I go out and run at 4:30 in the morning, or they would get up with me at 6:00 and rollerblade while I ran, or rode their bike while I ran. And I took them out participating. I took them on the trails with me. My son could keep up and he would do those things. And my son and I ran 10K races together here on Long Island. He was the youngest, at 11 years old, the youngest boy to ever finish a race here, a well-known race on Long Island.
Nice.
He was the first one to ever do it. Why? Because he'd get up with me and do it in the morning. So I brought them into my world. And because I own my own business in the food service, there'd be Saturdays I work 12 hours. I go to work by 7, come home at 7. But I would take whatever kid wanted to come with me, sometimes 2 at a time. And they come with me and put an apron on, and they work in the kitchen, and they go at 8 years old, 7, 6 years old, they bake cookies, and the chefs would show them how to peel carrots. And they would color in my office. So they would come 12 hours and spend the day at work with me. And when I came home at night, I could be exhausted, but I would sit with them and read and do homework with them. And, I also realized my wife was home with 4 kids all day. It was exhausting. So I had to do my time. So to answer your question, I gave up a lot of my free time. I gave up sleep hours, and I gave up all extracurricular activities. And that's how I did it. And I brought them into my business. And then when games, I would, I cut out of work and go back to work. There were times I coached my son's baseball on Saturday, and I have a monster day at work. I go get them set up, start the game, and then leave and go back to work.
Yeah.
My daughter Julia, my second child, my oldest daughter, was 29. I it was a Saturday morning. My wife gave me the call. Her water broke. She had to go to the hospital. I looked at my watch and said, oh, she's got a little bit of trip. I'll meet her at the hospital. I wrote a couple more catering orders, took some more calls, helped some directions, stopped for gas, got to the hospital just in time in my work clothes to deliver my daughter, spent a couple hours, and went back to, sound like, the old school work. So went back to work and had to go set up a catering job that night. And I just worked. They say work-life balance. I'm one of those guys that there's no such thing. You just put work and family together in it. And my kids never felt left out in that regard. They knew if they needed me, I'd be there. And to this day, it's the same way. So there wasn't work-life balance. It was just work and family, and I kind of intermingled them.
Yeah. I mean, as they got older, obviously you were able to put them into the business and kind of work through that. So how did you look at the bringing the kids into the business aspect to say, hey, this is, you already alluded a little bit to it, to where your kids were independent enough to say, no, I'm doing this work. It doesn't matter that whether it's the boss's daughter or the boss's son, I'm doing this. How did you kind of bring them in and say, hey, this is the kind of work you're going to be doing. This is what you're going to be doing. This is what your expectations are, even though they know you're the one who kind of owns and runs the business.
Yeah. So I appreciate that. And again, not to say I got it right, but I did my best. I did a lot of things with intention. So I gave it a lot of thought. And when I brought someone in, my daughters, my son, the job had to match their personality. Or I wanted to give them a job that would stretch them out of their comfort zone. Either of those two things. But it couldn't be at the detriment of them as a person or the business, right? So I had to balance that. But I did want them to stretch. So being in the hospitality business, especially for a young person, it lends itself to interaction. It made them correspond with people. Being a waiter, being a bartender, being in that realm, it forces you to be self-sufficient or confident. So, my kids, I would send them on catering jobs. We were off-premise caterer, and I would tell whoever the lead on the job was, when you introduce yourself to the customer, make sure my daughter's with you. I want her to learn. I want her to understand what it is. When you go knock at the door, make sure my son is right next to you. Let him introduce you guys as the catering event today. I want them to participate in that. And 3 of my kids were more outgoing. My one daughter, Julia, could be, but preferred not to. She'd rather work in the kitchen. She'd rather be in the back, cutting carrots and making salads and baking and doing that stuff. She'd rather do that. She didn't want the constant engagement of talking to people. But today she's in sales. So when she did it, she had to go on events on occasion, but she was the one that said, I'll carry this. And she was a leader. She played college soccer, and my daughter Caroline played college soccer. She played at San Diego State. She went, D1, big program, and they're able to do that and be leaders in soccer and in college, because some of it's because I exposed them at a young age that they were going to lead the way. They were going to be part of a team. So I put them in areas that were in their skill set times, and sometimes that they had to grow to match that skill set. And sometimes they did great, and sometimes they failed, and that was all part of the learning process. So,
what did your employees think of that when you were saying, "Hey, let my kid get and introduce you," and blah blah blah? Like, what did was there some resentment from some of the employees, or were they all pretty accepting of it and be like, "No, this is an opportunity for me to even mentor some younger folks"? Like, how did that go over?
Yeah. So I again, having employees, I don't know really what they felt or said behind my back, but it seemed like even to this day, I've had thousands of employees, and if my kids or myself ran them in the street, they would, that exact point that you just said, they'd mention to me how great it was as a dad and as a boss, how I gave them an opportunity not to override my employees, but to align with them. But also, one thing I made clear to my kids is that you are the boss's child, but now, of course, the old adage, right? You're going to work harder than everybody else because you have something to prove. You're not going to sit back and get away with it. And Later on, as my kids got older and really they never had any intention of taking over the business. There was no succession plan for them in the business. They didn't want it. They saw how hard I worked, and they didn't like doing that. But later on, when they were older and they did take on roles part-time, the employees loved working with them, especially the managers. They loved when my kids were on the schedule because they knew work was going to get done. They knew the job was going to be done right. The place was going to get clean. They were going to follow protocol. They weren't going to take shortcuts. So my kids took it serious that this was there. Like I tell them, hey, this is paying your college education. You are privileged that you're going to come out of college without any debt. When you show up for work, you keep that in mind. And you act like this is your college tuition, and you are acting in respect of me. And I used to teach that to my employees too. When we're on an event, we'd say, you're representing our brand. You're a representative of our brand. So you are representing me. You're the voice and the face of the brand. So you have to act and subscribe to and align with what we stand for. And my kids got that right away, and they were very proud to do it, and they took it very serious, So
nice. Yeah, I would imagine, obviously you talked about kind of building that work ethic in them as they were growing up and making sure that they kind of felt that. And I think that's, I would like to think that the employees being able to look at it and say, man, like, I hope all dads do this for their kids, and are doing that well, especially if the kids show up well. Now, if they're bratty, snotty pains in the butt, then I suppose that's a different story. It'll be a different conversation with the employees in the background. But
to that point, Adam, also my employees, again, I'm sure there's plenty of that over the years. Maybe I was too hard, too deliberate, but I held people to a standard, and I wanted more for them than they wanted for themselves, and sometimes that was a dangerous proposition. But and especially in the food service, you're dealing with, and I don't say to be mean or anything else, it's just a fact. You're dealing with low-level thinkers, and you're talking to people that, in some respects, and I say it with love and empathy, they've fallen out of life. These are people that would lose their license. They couldn't get out of their mother's basement apartment. So, but I felt for them, and I wanted more for them than they wanted for themselves. But I taught a lot of them about investing. I set them up. We had simple IRA plans, 401k. I taught them the difference of investing. To this day, I would send them motivational texts, and I inspire them, motivate them to be a better version of themselves. And, there's nothing great, and I don't do it for myself because I firmly believe the more we do for others, I get the greatest gain out of it. So if I'm selfless and I give my time and contribute to someone else's life, I feel better about it. But there's been so many people that have come back and thanked me because I was somebody that showed them that they could believe in themselves, and they were deserving and capable of a better life, where maybe in their own house they weren't told that. They were that was frowned upon. So they saw the way I spoke to my kids, but I spoke to them the same way. I inspired my children, but I also inspired them. And I live by that. And again, this is not to be arrogant or to impress anybody. It's just how I live my life. And the people that was meant for and appreciated it, great. The people, and to this day, the people that don't appreciate it, don't like me for it, hold it against me, well, it's not meant for you then. It's meant for the people that need it. And that's what I did. And I think that that message was heard by more people than it wasn't.
I think there's a great balance to have in your thought process. Be like, no, I have to be who I am, and if and this is what I believe, and this is where I'm at. Then if it's not for you, then whatever, chew the meat and spit out the bones. Like, get rid of what you don't like and move on. I'm not going to be able to please everybody with my actions, including I'm not going to be able to please all of my kids with my actions. But that leads me to another question. You'd already mentioned earlier, like there were some things that you made sure you're doing as a dad that maybe you were missing as a kid. What do you think your kids are going to do with their kids that they're like, you know what, I didn't get this from my dad, so I want to make sure that my kids get this from me, or I didn't get this from my mom, so I want to make sure I get, I give that to my kids. What do you think they're going to do?
Well, individually, my one daughter, Caroline, who was a bit of a handful, her and my son were the most defiant and most strongest personalities. So they would challenge us on everything. The other two, Julia and Amelia, were much more like they were strong-minded, but if you said we need this done or that done, they toed the line. They got in line, they did it. Caroline was much more challenging. And what she said as she got older was this, yeah, you and mom will push overs. My kids aren't getting away with anything I get away with. So she tells us right away that she's gonna be a hard ass with her kids, and they're not gonna get away with anything. You guys were too easy on me. You let me get away with too much. So that's one example of it. I don't know. I think that my daughter Julia might say that we gave her too many choices, so that her kids won't get as many choices, because my wife would always offer them, and I tell my wife, because my wife's that person. She needs, you want red or you want blue. You can't add a third color in there because it's too hard for her to make a decision. Yeah. Right? So my wife was always, whether it was what you want for dinner, what you want for breakfast, where you want to go tomorrow, you want to go to the beach, you want to go to the museum, you want to go see your grandmother. Too many choices. And my daughter Julia today would say, I have a hard time making decisions, and I second guess myself because as a kid you gave me too many choices, because we want to expose them to, hey, you have options. Yeah. But where one kid wanted all those options and today thrives in that, the other one felt like, I feel disempowered because I don't commit to anything. So not anything, but certain things throw for me. So those are two examples.
Interesting. So now that your kids are grown up, I mean, you're now doing business advisory stuff and not like running the active business anymore. So what does that look like for you on the business side, and what are your kids aware of on what you're doing now? Do they have any interest in doing business? Do they, or are they kind of all avoiding that side of it? I know they didn't want to go into your business, but are they doing any other sort of business?
Yeah. So in the last few years, I sold my Allstate insurance agency, and I sold my hospitality catering company, and I just exited just in the end of March, actually, for the employment contract was up, and we got the final payout, and I was officially out. So I've always done.
Congrats.
Thank you. I've always done business advisory. I've always helped people. It's always been a role I love doing. Like I said earlier, I love business. It's a passion of mine, and so I always did a lot of that. But now it's become full time. I'm doing that, business brokering. So I doing business brokering locally here for brick and mortar type businesses. I also teamed up with another Bo Eckstein. Him and I are building up his book of business, and we're doing franchising. So that's nationwide, and I can do that remote because my wife and I want to travel and visit kids all over. So that's helpful to do that. And my kids are, my son's interested in business, so he's in real estate, and he's entrepreneurial, and he's running an office and doing his thing, and he's all about building his book of business and creating wealth. My daughters are discovering themselves. They're more about adventure and lifestyle, and they love what money offers them of opportunities and lifestyle, but they don't necessarily want to sacrifice to get there. So they've seen it differently. They don't want to give up what I've given up to do it. They much rather figure out ways to make money, create money, but also live their life in the meantime. So will they down the road? I look every day now at businesses that my kids could get involved in. Possibly there are a bunch of franchises that I really love the model and enjoy them. And to that point, Adam, I realized early on, and this weighs into my children's futures, that being an independent entrepreneur and a serial entrepreneur in multiple businesses, but hospitality the mainstay for 34 years, there were times that I felt that I had to be an independent thinker. I needed to control my business decisions. Franchising was too much of a put me in a box paradigms, and I had lost control. But I realize now, and I explained to my kids more recently, that if I was in the right brand, the right model of franchising, I could have grown exponentially and been, let's say, taking over master territories and grown that and been more the chairman of the board and the visionary and director without being stuck in minutia. I got too often stuck deep in the weeds of, I say all the time, like if I owned Dunkin' Donuts franchises, I could have 15 of them. But instead, because you can't put Tic Tacs on the counter in a Dunkin' Donuts, they don't allow it. I spent too much time rearranging our impulse items, and that was a lot of wasted energy. And the minutia where I could have grown a business exponentially in franchising, but I was too arrogant at the time to think that was a good model. Now I see a lot of models that ultimately I might put my kids into. It might just fit them well because there are the structures, there are the guardrails put up that you have the support of the franchisor to keep you directed. So I really think there's some models out there that would really be good for them, that they could have that support without having to do all themselves. So they might come into the business reverse engineering it. So we'll see how that plays out.
Yeah, I mean, time will tell. Everybody gets to make their own decision. I didn't get into business until I was in my 30s, so it was one of those. It took me a little while to kind of realize that it was meant for me. That's for sure. So what kind of clients are you usually looking for, to go into some more of the business stuff, to ask you a little bit more about that? Yeah. What kind of clients are you typically looking for? What kind of clients are typically looking for you, I guess I should say, to have you come in and kind of help them on the advisory side of the house?
So the advisory consulting side of the business, it kind of aligns with the business brokering. It's a bridge from one to the other, not necessarily. They could be exclusive, or it could be a good help. So what I discovered, and I'll try to be concise here because I know I'm going on here, but to be concise, what I discovered in helping people in their business, small business that is, even despite themselves, some of the most successful businessmen I know got there for tenacity, for leading their ladder against the right building, their timing, whatever it was, they were able to muscle through it. They had a great product, they had a great service, and they were successful, financially successful. Some of them had the complete package. But when you really look in and have a conversation with them or dissect their business, you find out that they really don't truly understand all the functions of business. They don't really understand the cash flow that's required. They just were fortunate that business produced enough cash flow to pay their bills and run the business. They don't understand the cost of goods sold. They don't understand the metrics that go behind understanding what your product costs. They just sell at or below what the competitors sell because that's what the market sells at, not because they reverse engineer and realize we got to start with what it costs us and deliver the market the product based on our costs and our expected profits. They don't understand client acquisition, the cost of client acquisition. So all these functions of business that are very important, a lot of people don't understand. And that's either why they're suffering in business and barely holding on. And those few tweaks could put them on the path of not just financial success, but stress relief. You know, when you're a business owner, your stress is your family stress. If you're stressed at business, you take that home with you. If you're having financial struggles at work, more than likely, that's ricocheting back home. And that creates this perpetual burden and puts stress on the family, on the marriage. And so I look at it differently than most business advisors or business brokers. I look at it like, hey, I want to take you out of stress by teaching these things. And when I do, I'm working with someone right now, and he was W-2 guy, bought a business, just thought everybody wants to leave the W-2 and buy a business. They think it just runs itself, and it doesn't. Yeah. And he was clueless. As I started to teach him these functions of business and these little tweaks, all of a sudden he could see that. I said, listen, this is all fixable. The good news is I'm here to help you. It's like going to the doctor and realizing that, we just need to clear out that artery and you're good to go. Without it, you could die an ugly death. But by clearing it out, just put 10 years back on your life. Same thing in business. But until you go get that checkup, until you have the right people directing you and performing those procedures, so the people that need me aren't just the people that are hurting. They're successful people. And I say that because being in business so many years, I made the most money while I was making the most money. And I don't say that to be cute. I say it because I brought in a consultant when we were going through the greatest growth. Growth is expensive. We're going through growth pains. And I couldn't get my partner in line. We weren't congruent in where we need to go. I brought a consultant in to really get my partner up to speed. And the consultant then, we're making a lot of money. And then he taught me about price elasticity. It's going back 25 years. And I was like, what's price elasticity? And he explained to me the definition of, well, you're charging because that's what your competitors are charging, but you haven't really tested the marketplace. So then he said, for argument's sake, how many people do you feed a month? He said, 20,000 people. He goes, okay, could we get 50 cents more per person? I said, I don't know. Let's try it. He goes, can you get $1? Oh, I don't know. So we went 50 cents. We raised it 50 cents, brought in $10,000 a month, right to the bottom line. There were no other expenses. Yeah. And then I went from making a lot of money to a lot of money. And those tweaks were an education. So you asked the question, there's people that are suffering in business, that are stressed and it's causing harm in their families and their marriage. Those people definitely need someone like me or someone else. Like Jay Bogana in GoBundance is genius. And I love listening to Jay because, his teachings are very similar to mine and I understand his wisdom very well. And then there's also the guys that are doing very well who might be arrogant and don't think they need a consultant, but coming in and making those tweaks like I made in my business and created lead generation funnels and things of that nature, streamlining process and procedures. It does take stress out of the business, but it also creates exponential growth or exponential profits, or even for success plans for the next generation, or handing over like an EOS model, putting the right people in the right seats so that you can step away from the business. All those things come from bringing someone in, another set of eyes, another teaching, and applying it to the business. So I can help those that are thriving and successful and teach them ways to either make their life easier or grow their profits, or I could take people out of pain. There's no doubt about it. And then on the business broker side, some people come to me that they want to sell their business, but it's very hard, or the market's very much smaller for obvious reasons, to sell a business that's losing money. Yeah. You need someone that's going to come in and be a takeover artist and buy it on the cheap, knowing that they have the engineering capability to build it and grow it. But that market is very few. Nobody really wants to buy or pay exponential multiple dollars on how do you value a business that's losing money, right? So I could go in and help somebody fix their business so that then they can exit that business, where they might just shut the doors. They might just hand the keys back to the landlord and walk away, when all it took was maybe 6 months of fixing the business, and then they could get a multiple earning payout on the sale of that business. So, but people, especially men, women are better than men. Our egos get in the way of us, and that's why people lose their house to foreclosure, because they don't ask for help. They don't expose their limiting situations to other people and be vulnerable. You got to be vulnerable. So you got to put your ego aside and allow someone like myself or any other expert to come in and fix it. So yeah.
It's the independent third party who has such a different view on it, but experience in other arenas of life that could really help pull you out of some of the terrible situations you're in. Because when you're in a rough spot, like, that's all you can see. That's all you could focus on is a rough spot. It's like that motorcyclist that can't look through the turn. They're only looking at that rock in the middle of the turn. And it's like, that rock's going to take you out if you're focusing on that. You gotta figure out the best path out, and sometimes the wisdom of other people. So I love that you're doing that and sharing that with folks. And I know that just having you on the acquisitions microtribe calls is just awesome to hear your thoughts and hear the wisdom that you have, the experience that you have. It's been great to be able to feed off of some of that. So I thank you for that on the internal side as well. But RJ, it was awesome to get to chat with you. And like I said earlier, like, this is one of the few podcasts where I didn't actually talk a lot. Usually I talk a whole lot as well, but I didn't need to. You kind of filled in a bunch of gaps for me. So it was great.
Speak more, Adam.
No, I know. It's that's not something I'm usually told. Usually I'm told I need to shut up more. So, but RJ, it was absolutely awesome to chat with you, get to know a little bit more about how you raised your kids, and hearing how open and honest you are about that. If folks are listening to this and they're like, I want to work with somebody like RJ. I really love the concepts you have, the experience you have, the thought process that you have behind you. What's the best way for folks to get a hold of you?
Yeah, so the real best way is I'll give you my phone number, and that's the easiest way. Text me, call me. I don't mind doing that. 516-707-4670. Also on LinkedIn at RJ Ralph Galdorisi, as well as Facebook, same. And the name of my company is Integrity Business Coaching. So, but again, my phone number, 516-707-4670. The quickest, easiest way, shoot me a text. And I always make myself available. I enjoy speaking to people and learning. And the other side of it, I'll leave you with this. I live my personal life the way I lead my business life. I'm not a transactional person. So going through the process, selling somebody a business on the franchise side or the consulting side, I'm never going to put someone in a situation that they don't belong in. I don't need the commission. I'm not doing it for the money. I do it first with integrity, hence the name of the business. And I want to make sure they land correctly. It's not transactional, it's relationship. So I want to make sure that, again, the legacy of who I'm helping goes beyond the person that I'm actually helping. Or if I'm not able to help them, I'm going to tell them, I don't think I'm the right person for you, because they'll appreciate that. And then that honesty will be passed along to somebody else. So that's who I am. And that's how I choose to live my life, because I don't want anyone to say that I took a check over what was best for them. That's not how I want to know.
No, I love that. Thank you again, RJ. I really appreciate you jumping on. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Please reach out to RJ. As you can tell, he's not shy about talking to you, that's for sure. But no, he's going to be a wealth of knowledge, helping you out a ton. Listen to our episode over on the Delegate That podcast as well. It was a great conversation, digging into delegation and business over on there as well. But thank you, everybody, for listening. Please like, subscribe, comment below. Let us know what your favorite part of the podcast was. We look forward to seeing everybody on the next episode, and we will talk to you all later.
Thank you so much for listening to the BizDad Podcast. We hope you found some value in your time here with us, and we look forward to bringing you the next episode. If you've enjoyed today's show, please subscribe and share so you and your friends won't miss our upcoming episodes. Connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Rumble, where we continue these discussions and share more valuable content. Be the dad you know you need to be, and run your business in a way you're proud to share with your kids. Keep crushing it.